and thanks for checking out this photo manipulation that I'm going to be working on today. So this is the image that we're going to be creating. Obviously it's a monster truck in kind of a stadium setting with some pretty cool lighting effects that I've used to create it, that I'll show you how I did. It's relatively simple to do. This truck is a plastic model that I built and painted and added some mud and grunge to it, and then photographed it for this particular photo manipulation. And if you'd like a copy of the truck, just send me a comment and I will make one available for you to download. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's our base layer, which is just of a muddy field, and the first thing I'm going to do with this is actually distort it. So I'm going to hit Control T to select it, and then I'm going to hit right key and hit distort, and then I'm going to pull this down until that horizon is just below middle. And then I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to add a little shadowing right here. And I'm going to use my gradient tool. So here's your gradient tool. Make sure this is set to black. And this is selected right here, 100%. And then I'm just going to do this. And it's just going to add some black shadowing just along the bottom edge of this. Okay. So I've also added this solid color adjustment, and the number on that is 363823. And the reason I did that is this color will set the tone for the entire image. And the way I do that is I'm going to my background layer, my muddy field, and I'm going to set the blending mode to multiply, which allows the color of this layer to bleed up through and create that basic tonality that I want for this image. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. I use some brighter colors, some bright, vibrant yellow, for example. And I've got some other tutorials that I use this technique with that you can check out. And I have another one lined up that I'm going to do as well. So now what I want to do is I want to blend these layers better together. So I'm going to add a layer mask here. I'm going to hit B to select my brush. Black, I want to make sure it's very soft. The opacity about 50% is right. And then I'm just going to blend those in together. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to bring in our stadium lights. I'm going to hit Control T and then just drag them up to make them a bit bigger. Something like that. Then I'm going to add a mask and just mask this base out so that it looks like it's just poking up in the mud. I'm going to add this actually above this. Let me write that as shadow, bottom shadow. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to do that by dragging the layer to this plus sign. That's now made a copy of it. I'm going to hit Control T and I'm going to drag it this direction. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And position that. Okay, so now I'm going to add a layer, and we will call this lights. And I'm going to pick a color. Just going to pick kind of this bright greenish yellow, CFFF29. Going to lower my brush again, make sure it's soft, have it 100%, and then I'm just going to click and make a spot on every one of these lights to make it look like these lights are on. Okay, something like that looks good. Now we're going to add the light rays. So I'm going to call this light ray. And we're going to use a little bit different color for this. A little brighter color, and so it's E6FF00. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bracket key, and I'm going to make a pretty big brush here. Going to make a dot, then I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to hit Distort, and I'm going to drag that down on an angle like that, okay? Then I'm going to create another one, light ray 2. Let's do the same thing, hit Control T, right click, distort, and bring that down to mirror what we've done on the other side here. Something like that. I'm going to add another one, light beam 3. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, do the same thing. Going to click, I'm going to hit Control T, going to hit right click, hit Distort, and I'm going to bring that down. And just make that a bit fatter. And then I'm going to set the blend mode on that to soft light. So that just adds a little glow to that original light. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'll call this light beam 4. Same thing. Hit Control T, right click, hit Distort, and bring that down. Just widen that up a bit. And then do this to soft light. So that's the look that we get from doing that. I might hit Control T and bring that down a bit. Okay. Now I've got kind of this hard line that I don't want, so I'm going to add a mask and make sure my brush, drop this opacity down to around 50 and just kind of smooth that out a bit and add a mask here. Do the same thing, just get rid of that hard light that we're that we're getting there from that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add our truck. So here's our truck layer. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Maybe not quite that big. Something like that. Okay. And then I'm going to add a mask. And we want to make this look like it's obviously buried in the mud here. So I'm going to mask out these wheels and make them look like they're down in the mud. Make it smaller so I can get back here and do this one. Okay, that looks pretty good. And once we add some shadowing and that type of thing, it'll even make that effect look even bigger. So what I want to do now is make these wheels look like they're spinning. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make another copy of this layer here. And that will allow us to mask in some of the things that are going to blur that we don't want to blur. So I'll show you how I do that. It'll make more sense, I think, once I just show you. So I'm going to go up here to Filter, Blur Gallery, and Spin Blur. And just going to bring this over this wheel. Looks like the size is already set pretty good. And then this adjusts how much spin that you want. And I actually want very little. I still want some of that texture on the tire to show a bit. But something just like that. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to think for a minute. Okay, then we're going to repeat the process. So filter gallery, spin blur. I'm going to come down here. Hit OK. And the problem's going to be when we blur these, it's also going to try to blur some of this frame and infrastructure here. And that's why we need that second copy. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. Filter gallery, spin blur. Come and add that to this. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Something like that. And when I'm done here, you'll notice that this is going to be blurry. Okay, and see how that's blurred this section right through here. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to Blur Gallery, Spin Blur, and do this last wheel. Hit OK. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to our mask, and I'm going to make sure this is on 100%. I want this to be hard, and I'm going to add back in that infrastructure that isn't going to be blurred, and then I'll go through. I will then mask back in these tires where it needs to be blurred. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to hit X, make sure it's black, and I'm going to mask that in. I'm going to hit X and hit some of this again that we still want that blur on. Okay, and I think that looks really good. Okay, now we're going to add, so I'm going to go down here, add a layer to add a shadow. And this has got some interesting light here because it's got kind of lights coming in from both sides. So what I'm going to do here first is hit the key here to go back to my black brush. I want the opacity to be right around 50. I want it to be hard. Now I'm going to make it pretty big by hitting my bracket key. And I'm going to, this light here would cause kind of a shadow this direction. So I'm going to click, and then I'm going to hit shift click out here, and that will draw a line between the two. And I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to click, shift click, and that draws that line. I'm going to do the same thing here, shift, or click, shift click, shift, or click, shift click again. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, only bring that this direction. Click, shift click, which probably pretty much just filled all of that in. But that actually looks pretty good. Okay, now we want to add some coloring to the truck. So I'm going to add a balance adjustment. What are my adjustments on? Okay, and I'm going to set this at minus 55 plus 25 and minus 50. And I want to make sure this is a clipping mask. So I only want this to affect the truck, so I'm going to do Control or Alt rather, and then click between the two layers so that only impacts the truck. And then I want to add a selective color. And I want to go to neutrals, which is where that is at. And I'm going to set this to 7, minus 5. Just bump the yellows up a titch and the blacks up a bit. And again, make sure this is selective color. And that just brings that into more of that color range of the lighting and that type of thing that we're looking for. So now let me add another layer, and we will add the lighting to the truck itself. So change colors here. Something in this range. And do the same thing that we've just been doing. I'm using the bracket key to make that bigger and smaller. Just turn those on. Turn these on. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to come here and I'm going to click here, add a new layer as a clipping mask. And then I'm going to use the paint tool to color that, and you notice how it just colors the truck. And then I'm going to add a mask, and I'm going to hit Control I. Now what we're going to do is make sure this is set to brush, that this needs to be white. We're going to lower the opacity a lot. And then we're just going to paint in where that lighting would be hitting this. So obviously anywhere you see highlights, so here, this windshield here is going to get them. You can see that. This front bumper down here. And see what that's doing, clicking that on and off. That's adding that coloring. Adding it to the wheels here. Kind of the back here, a little bit to the bed, a little bit there. And that just makes it look like that light is reflecting off the truck here with about the same color range as the stadium lighting goes. Now I'm going to go clear at the top, and I'm going to add, oh, I didn't want to do that, sorry. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to add a selective color, and this is just going to be a global adjustment just to kind of get everything in the same color range and blended really well. And this is going to be pretty subtle. And that just is kind of putting everything so it blends a little bit better together. Okay, so we're moving along here. Now obviously now we need to create the mud and stuff that's being sprayed up. So I'm going to do a new layer. I'm going to call this mud. And I'm going to find a brush. I think I like this one. And I'm going to hit the default color to black. And then sorry, I'm having some issues with my layers here. Okay, so now I'm going to just start adding. Let's go back up to 100% here. Obviously it's going to have a lot of mud that's been thrown up off of the back of these tires. Particularly up this direction. And the closer this is to the mud, the more debris is going to be visible. Okay, and that is getting pretty close to be done. This is where I kind of have my 90-10 rule, where you basically have it done and then you can go ahead and do some experimentation with some settings in like Camera Raw and other things just to play around and adjust the color. I'm actually going to add, to finish this off, some filtering using the Nik Collection. So I'm going to create a stamp, and you do that by hitting Control Alt Shift and E, and that's going to just combine all of the layers into a single layer. And then I'm going to go up here to Filter, Nik Collection, using Color Effects Pro. And I'm in the recipe section, and I am going to use this Super Punch. And let's give you the idea, kind of the before and after. Not overly dramatic, but I like the way it kind of adds some contrast to it. And go ahead and hit OK. And that's it. That's our super truck, or our, sorry, waiting for this to finish. So this is our monster truck photo manipulation. Thanks for watching. I hope that you may have learned a couple of things, and that you can use in your photo manipulations in the future. Thanks again for watching.